won't stop till I hear him say,
Warning. The information that we convey in these videos and the content on this page simply provides general consumer information. It is not legal advice or regulatory guidance. It is not intended to sway your personal bias in any way. We are simply just relaying information already available to the general public. We highly suggest you do your own research and draft your own opinion on the topics disclosed in this video breakdown. Without further ado, sit back, relax, enjoy this video breakdown, and if you're not already subscribed to the YouTube channel, consider doing so now. Okay, what is going on, CYPRX Advanced YouTubers? Welcome back to the CYPRX YouTube page. I hope that everybody's having an amazing weekend. In today's video breakdown, ladies and gentlemen, I have a very intuitive video breakdown for you all. As always, piecing some parts of the puzzle for you all together, playing some video snippets, hopefully awakening everybody, all of my followers, all of my viewers to what is really going on in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, the world is at a point of significant economic danger. Okay, we are seeing massive possibilities coming into fruition that nobody sees coming. Okay, malicious macro hacks of the financial system, potentially the central banks, all of them getting it wrong, housing collapses, an electricity system failure, the next possible pandemic, a major potential nuclear war. Ladies and gentlemen, there's so much going on in the world right now that people are asleep to. They have no idea outside of their little comfort bubble what is really going on in the real world. So let's all escape from the matrix together in today's video breakdown, dive down the rabbit hole, and let's see via some major influencers what is going on behind the scenes via some interviews that I've collected and pieced together for you guys, so that way you don't have to go and sift through and watch the whole entire interview, taking key takeaways from each of these interviews and piecing them together for you guys, for you all to make up your own decision. Make sure that as investors or day traders, you are protecting yourself financially, being responsible with your capital, understanding that preservation of capital is the most and number one important rule in trading. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and enjoy this intuitive video breakdown. If you aren't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, please consider doing so now. We really do appreciate the love and support, and make sure that you smash that thumbs up button. It does help boost the YouTube algorithm. It really does, and it helps push these videos out to more individuals like yourselves. With that being said, sit back, relax, and enjoy this video breakdown.
I know you've been very, very critical. You've come out saying you feel the inflation numbers are actually much higher. They're actually suppressing the inflation numbers they're giving us. Yeah. Just thoughts on where you think they're headed. How much longer can they tighten for?
I think the pivot is around the corner.
Really?
I've said all along. I said it in 2009,
yeah,
and I said it for the last 15 or so years. They cannot raise rates. It's mathematically impossible. They cannot unwind the balance sheet. It's mathematically impossible.
Let's start by getting your thoughts on the situation in Europe. I know it's a beautiful day and everything looks beautiful, but it's scary times for a lot of folks.
It is, and I think it's a scary time for all folks around the world, but Europe has a very particular problem, which is energy. But
so despite, as we're speaking, pound is suffering, the euro suffering, US dollar remains dominant. Would you say we're in a full-blown, is this a currency war? Would you define it as such?
I think it's the beginnings of a currency war, and that is I'm absolutely certain that we're heading into a global monetary system reset. Global monetary system reset.
And let's talk inflation now, because you have some pretty controversial views. I saw, one of the folks say to you, you're telling us to just keep about our business, keep grocery shopping. Inflation's not going anywhere. What's your latest take in response on inflation?
Pretty much
Pretty much that.
Hey, listen, I'm like a holograph. I'm actually transmitting this message from the future, right?
You're seated in front of me, though, right?
Maybe,
okay.
But my mind for sure is 18 months ahead.
Okay.
And 18 months ahead, let me tell you, I see tumult. I see chaos in the global economy. Chaos in the global economy.
And you think the stocks that will get, or the companies that will get hit most are, we've already seen the disastrous results from Netflix, Apple, who gets hit the hardest here?
Well, actually, money gets hit the hardest. And this is where it's confusing, because there are actually three forms of money. There's only one that we ever think about, which is your local bank. And it's regulated by the Federal Reserve, and your deposits are insured by the Treasury. And it's like homespun apple pie is wonderful, except that is just one, not tiny, but one aspect of money, okay? And it's not been expanding for the last 15 years, okay? There's another form of money, which I call laundromat tokens, and it's pure public money. It's the Federal Reserve coming in and creating all these banking reserves. But these banking reserves are latent. They're not real money. It requires the banks to say, yeah, I feel really good. I'm a funky risk taker. I want to lend to the household sector in America. And then the final form of money, and this is where, to the crux of your question, is this kind of matrix world, this offshore repo market, euro-dollar. And then the final form of money is this kind of matrix world, this offshore repo market, euro-dollar market. Now they've been printing a lot of money, okay? And that's where we see inflation.
Does that concern you at all about the U.S. not being the reserve currency of the world? Does that?
Well, it concerns me only from the point of view that I think it may usher in very dangerous times.
Right.
Because it's seldom that global power shifts without conflict. You know, if you look back through history, it's very seldom that there's a power shift from a global leader in finance, commerce, military to another without some form of deadly conflict. And that's the part that worries me. Usher in very dangerous times.
Right.
It's very seldom that there's a power shift from a global leader in finance, commerce, military to another without some form of deadly conflict. And that's the part that worries me.
The IMF actually came out with a scathing critique of Kwarteng's tax cut plan, calling the tax cuts very unfair. In their words, it will likely increase inequality. Is that a view that you share?
Well, yes, because what we're seeing right now, and it's not just in the UK, this is in the US, this is really throughout the developed world, is that in the period of time, particularly since the pandemic, when economies were closed, people were, anxious, all sorts of things were happening, and we had all this stimulus from central banks and everything else. What happened was corporations, the heads of those corporations made even more money. Yes, the markets are off for different reasons, like rate hikes now, but that's what was happening, and that created more inequality to begin with, because all this money that was being created, the lower rate, accessibility to lower rate money by corporations and banks was exacerbating inequality. And tax cuts you throw in on top of that, when we're looking at inflation, we're looking at recession, we're looking at an energy crisis, not just in Europe but throughout the world. We're looking at geopolitical tensions. It's not something that should be done right now, and it is something that causes more angst, rightly so, to people who are looking at their governments and saying, you can't even afford what's going on right now. How could you afford it when there's less money coming in from corporations paying their fair share? They also haven't been able to do anything to even impact, for example, rent prices, because as I mentioned before, raising rates so quickly has created a situation where people entering the market really can't, and that might bring some housing prices down, but it's also increasing rent prices, which also goes into large inflation numbers. So what the Fed is doing in general is that it is hurting the people at the bottom of the economy. What the Fed is doing in general is that it is hurting the people at the bottom of the economy.
Just getting back to your thoughts on, let's say, is there a way to prevent the death of people? What assets would you be looking at, or what would you be telling the fine folks watching this program? Like, what is one to do if this is the reality we're living in? Panic.
Panic is the most subversive statement you can make. The status quo is that tiny culture of the 1% get richer and richer and richer because they've aligned themselves to the economic policies of the mercantilist nations such as China. It enriches China and enriches Wall Street. But you folk at home, how do you feel about it? Like, because you're getting screwed.
Absolutely.
Okay? But you folk at home, how do you feel about it? Like, because you're getting screwed.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Like your book, very interesting read. So when do you think the Fed could pivot?
Well, again, in terms of a three-stage pivot, I do think that their last hike of the year will be lower than 75 basis points, but it will still be a hike. I do think, I think that sometime in the first half of next year, they're going to go towards neutrality. And I think in the second half of next year to the beginning of the following year, I think we're going to see potential cuts, because I do think that the problems that are happening for the economy right now are going to be building up over this next year period, and that's going to require the Fed to to come off of what will be significant rate levels and prices on bonds as rates have risen, and as there has been this uncertainty as to what the Fed and other central banks are going to do next. And I think the fact that Jamie Dimon is coming out now and sort of changing what he said before is potentially both preempting and hoping that oddly, that the Fed will see that there's been economic weakening to an extent that it has to basically back off. I think at that time, as we've seen happen in the pandemic period, the financial crisis period, and throughout this period of significant loose monetary policy on average from central banks, I think that Wall Street's going to sort of jump back in. And I think that all of these sort of, particularly the names that have fallen off so badly, whether that is in tech or new money and those sorts of, sort of more speculative, more risk-on type items, I think those will ultimately be the beneficiary.
Let's talk a little bit about what role you feel gold will play in this new system. And to challenge that, I would say, what about digital currencies? There's so much talk about how if there was a new reserve currency, it would be digital in some form. Avoid that death scenario for the folks. I've had, experts on saying you should be more in cash now, be ready to be liquid, being gold. Is there anything you're seeing right now that could provide some solace?
Investing presently is like licking honey from the razor's edge. And by that, what I mean is, so you mentioned gold.
Yes.
Gold. There were a few people that could see the approaching storm of 2008, the bankruptcy of the financial system. And they purchased gold. Gold, the least risky asset you can think of. Gold halved in value. This is when the storm finally hits and becomes onshore, there's a liquidation moment. Everything is sold.
Right.
Okay, so actually, when the storm finally hits and becomes onshore, there's a liquidation moment.
So Hugh, do you feel comfortable going on record saying you think we're about to enter the worst, or perhaps we've already entered the worst economic period in history?
As you put it, yes, Dickens, why not? I'm saying to you, we are in a depression. Okay. This is 1937, and the Fed has the audacity to tighten in a damn depression.
Charlie Munger, who made derogatory comments, but not that long ago, Jamie Dimon, someone who said he thought Bitcoin was, I think, a fraud, and has subsequently come around and realized that, in my judgment, this is an industry that is not going away. It's valued today at about $1.3 trillion. But I do think, I've spoken to Christine Lagarde personally, and I think we need to stop measuring it just by what's going on with the overall value and how are these assets being used to solve real world problems. And I think time and time again, we're seeing more and more real use cases solving real scaled problems where blockchain technologies can reduce friction measured by cost and speed in a way that I think improves the overall economy. But, there are some tokens out there that are focused on solving a problem. And those are ones that I can see being used in the future. And we could give a number of different examples. Some of them are present here in Davos. But there's also ones that I look at, I hear the description, and I don't get it. And I think there is risk, as Christine Lagarde commented. They are speculative, they are risky, but that doesn't mean there isn't real opportunity.
Right, and I find this conversation refreshing. We've spoken to so many crypto experts out there who know nothing about this, who just want the gamification of it. They just want to encourage people into various Ponzi schemes. I hear what you're saying. We're great fans of what blockchain technology can do, but just to categorically say, you think most of these products are just going to disappear and investors are going to lose their money over the coming years?
I think there's a high risk that, well, certainly when you say most, meaning more than 50%, I think there's a high risk that most of these
now. How many fiat currencies in the world are there? About 180?
Look, there is clearly examples where these can be used. What Ripple is doing with our digital asset that we use in our technology stack called XRP is solving a cross-border payments problem. And that cross-border payments problem we all have experienced When you're moving money cross borders, it is slow and it is typically expensive. There's no reason we can't use these technologies to solve that
I
problem.
hear you. And you know what? I think more regulation, better, then we can all know what we're trading with. Why don't you want more regulation on XRP? Why are you in a big fight with SEC's Gary Gensler that's just going on and on?
What is going on? And that's frustrating. Gary Gensler was quoted as saying that justice delayed is justice denied, yet at every turn the SEC has been slowing this one down. Look, we were the ones advocating for years that we needed regulatory clarity in the United States. And then for the SEC to say, hey, even though it's not clear, we're going to bring a civil lawsuit saying that XRP is a security, we find to be a bit ironic. I'm actually advocating for regulatory clarity. I've been in...
Not for XRP to be a security.
I think most crypto assets are not securities, and I think they are clearly commodities, and they are regulated. I mean, when people say, as Gary Gensler has said, this is the Wild West, that is not true. That is not true. That is not true. We're a regulated company by many different regulatory bodies today, and outside the United States, you have the regulatory clarity.
I won't stop till I hear him say, la, 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 la.